Oh, good. Well, while everyone else is joining,
Mhm.
this will be an interesting session. I mean, Lance, you're one of my favorite people to chat about cybersecurity with because you live and breathe cybersecurity every day,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And more so than most of us, right? Like, I mean, I tell people that yeah, we are a cybersecurity company, but what you guys do is just on next level. So
Mhm.
I'm super excited about this conversation. What's gonna happen is we'll have a quick chat, completely unscripted, right? This is no slides, no, let's see where the conversation takes us kind of
Mhm.
scenario here,
Mhm.
and then we are going to break out where all our guests can join us in the separate Teams room that Atia will share the link to after we are done
Mhm.
here so that they can actually talk to us and ask questions. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, this platform doesn't allow us an interactive kind of mode, but when we get there, it will allow us to talk to the audience and answer questions. So the topics that we're going to talk about really is 2025. There was only one thing that everybody heard, Lance, and I
Mhm.
don't know if you were tired of it, but I kind of pseudo am, is that it was AI or bust, right? And that's all it was. And then it almost felt like, and that's why when I reached out to you and I'm like, man, doesn't it feel like no one's actually paying attention to cybersecurity? And I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a reckoning because I see all these budgets being diverted towards AI, but then at the same time, cybersecurity is not as front and center because everyone just wants to talk about AI. So what's happened? Let's talk about what's going on
Yeah. So the
and what do you
AI.
see? Yeah.
Yeah. So the AI thing is interesting, right? So it is a big. Let's just start with the facts, right?
Yeah.
The facts are in 2022. And I won't get too technical, but essentially, OpenAI used to be this nonprofit, like you could go there and learn about like algorithms, and it was all open source and reinforcement learning models and all these cool things for data
Yeah.
scientists, right? It was literally almost like a library.
Yes.
Walking into it was before AI, as we call it. I prefer to call that augmented intelligence right now.
Right.
The real AI is a complicated matter.
Right.
But we are in 2022. Obviously, ChatGPT, this and that busts right open because the distance between how we did this stuff at scale, all the stuff suddenly changed because we had like something very close. They're called BERT models, and essentially you could ask a question in normal NLP language and get vectors back and then and get things, and that was
Okay.
already a great achievement. But then figuring out how to put all that together and do it where it predicts. And so right now, AI, just so we have a fact, is a statistical model that helps predict the next thing in the pattern, right? It's a
Right.
cluster finder, essentially,
Right.
right? And that is how humans work in many cases too, at least in their language and linguistics, right? So
Right.
the 2022 thing came on. I, of course, run towards everything I'm afraid of and learn everything I can about it. So I spent time playing with AI the minute it came out, just like everybody else did. That's probably in the tech scene, at least, and stuff. And there's two sides of the coin. There's the people who are fearing it and staying away from it and like going, no, no, no. Creative artists are upset with the intellectual property, blah, blah, blah. But rightfully so in some aspects. I totally
Yeah.
agree. But it was also like, holy crap, this is going about to change the world. And those who are paying attention, it is. And right now everything has its disruptions, but then AI is also causing this extra disruptions almost every single month. OpenClaw being
Right.
the next one lately.
Right.
Now we're in the age of super agents, where we were in the age of chatbots prior, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the problem is it's a big disruption. It's
Right.
both hitting emotion, cybersecurity isn't just about the technical. It's about the
Right.
psyops, the emotion. It's a human problem, right? Computers are doing just fine. So can humans, right? And so it comes through. We all have opinions about it, and then some people are playing with it, some people are staying away from blah blah blah. Somewhere in the middle, and then there are obviously these companies,
Right.
really well invested into companies like now, like coming through and making their own. And then, people like Elon Musk or all that stuff and, opinions
Right.
aside, but all these people with billions of dollars are kind of taking the lead. And then you, just like in crypto in the 90s, you have Hugging Face and you have open source players too, the DeepSeek, the this and that. And it's a great equalizer in cybersecurity. The bad guys are going to use it, but so can the good guys. And it's even. That playing field is even finally. That's the difference. That we do have finally a chance to actually fight cyber dog fights in real time against our adversaries.
Right.
Because it's like AI to me is a time travel of information, kind of like a plane gets you to A to B faster. It gets information in front of you immediately, right? We don't got to go to Reddit or Stack Overflow. So the where we're at now is after those facts, what's happened is it's a great distraction. There's this big codependency on it for those who are using it because it does make your life seem easier so far. But I've noticed this, we've all, including myself and others that play with it, we're skipping how do we secure it. I mean, people are talking about it, but people are playing with it more because it's like, wow. And we'd rather have the convenience than the security. And that's where this sudden security is not the big talk anymore. It's AI. And then AI and security, where's that headed, right? So,
but I think what's happening is I think there have been just as many breaches in 2025 as there were every other year, if not more. But when was the last time? Like, do you remember? If I ask the audience, do you remember a single breach from 2025? I bet they won't be able to name it. But in the years past, they would be able to name something like, oh, there was a Cisco breach in 2023 or a Marriott one in 2021. We are not talking about the breaches as much. I don't think the breaches are getting news that it used to, right? And for some reason, the conversation is just being shifted. And I find that to be dangerous. I find that there's reckoning coming at this point as a result.
So another point in this, and I'm going to give you my theory of why I think this is occurring, right? Where the concept of alert fatigue. You work in cybersecurity, so you get alerts. You get this. If you work in the SOC, you understand this, right? You get it in engineering. Slack alerts keep hitting, and and after a while, you just kind of naturally ignore them or get used to them, right? More that it becomes an annoyance, so it's just like, oh, let me mute that, and then the next thing you know, something falls over, and you're like, oh crap, and you feel dumb. That has probably occurred to almost every single person in the past because it's human nature, and it is a real problem. Now, breach fatigue, I think, is one, we have a big distraction, AI. Two, cybersecurity is both a community and an industry. Right. So one of the challenges with industry is that the question of, are we really solving any problems or are we making a lot of money, comes into play. I personally think we can do both, obviously. But in the reality, the industry has kind of taken over a little bit. The use of hype, the use of this and that, blah, 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 is kind of plays out. And let me give you a great example. Like when we do the top 10 security vulnerabilities of the year, right? In 2025. If you go and actually do your history and do the top 10 vulnerabilities from 2015, they're the same.
Exact same thing.
They're the same thing, right? There might be a new technology like AI, this and that. Now we have a top 10 AI OWASP, but it's the same concept. It's input and output, this, that, blah, blah, blah. It's not like these bad guys do anything new. They're applying this, and this, and then it's like a system. And if it doesn't work, they figure out, and then they evolve and they go boom, 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 right?
So the fundamentals for the bad guys are the same. The fundamentals for the good guys should remain the same as well then. Correct. Right,
exactly. And so, but here's the thing. Why is it in 10 years and sometimes 15, we've been in this industry for so long, why haven't we actually solved these problems? But the real question is, we have solved these problems. Well, the real answer is we have solved these problems. But it reminds me of kind of like, this is the conspiracy theory of, do we solve cancer or do we give them medicine? Now, I'm not saying that is what we do, but the thought process, the same mental exercise of, are we incentivized to actually solve security? Because X box, I'm not going to name companies, but X major box that costs $1 million then costs 10 people that also are about $1 million to run that box. And it's like, then you have these agile attackers hitting a castle, using gunpowder back in the period when gunpowder was brand new and stuff. And suddenly all these castles are like, dropping like flies with their bow and arrows, right? And yet we have processes in place, we have this and all this stuff. And these processes do work. I am not saying they don't. I actually think compliance and process stuff, for the sake of actually security, not like checklists, work very well because it's a people process, tools. And and we've come up with frameworks and this and that, right? I work in a world where I'm probably less processed. I'm unorthodox and I'm a bit of a earth shaker, and I'm like trying things and things like, I mean, my title says it right there, right? So, but the question I have, the way I'm looking at it is, it's like, I think we have lost track and lost sight, and we've gotten alert fatigue, but on these breaches, plus we have distractions, and we have news and climate and politics and blah, blah, all this stuff. I think all of us can agree we're probably all feeling at capacity already anyways.
Right.
And breaches that we've gotten numb to because it just happens all the time. And you're just like, but yet we don't solve the problem, even though there are answers.
Here's my thing. And this is going to be a widely unpopular opinion when I say this, okay? The reason why we still see a lot of breaches, and the reason why companies still ignore cybersecurity largely in favor of other projects, is because the repercussion of a breach, the price that individuals have to pay for a breach is not the same as, let's say, if there was a CFO that that knew that there was malpractice happening in the company and didn't report it. There are laws against that. But at least in Canada, where we are, there are no laws against companies knowingly ignoring cybersecurity mandates, right?
So,
and when I know that there's a precedence with Uber, where Uber CISO was charged.
He went to,
right?
I think he did fire and possibly go. I don't know if he did jail time. I can't remember, but
there was a little bit of jail time there as well. But I don't think I don't think that's I don't think there's that. Like, yes, someone will lose a job, but is there a compliance standard from a? I know that at SEC now you do have to report cybersecurity with your financial reportings to the market. But again, it's not like Sarbanes-Oxley. It's not there's got to be something that's more mandated that hasn't been mandated yet. Right.
So the interesting thing is I actually think money is a bigger motivator than jail time. And I also think it is a controversial perspective, but it's not like not ever been done. GDPR was an attempt at, especially if we talk about third-party supply, because we go down what's causing all these breaches and such.
Yeah.
Most of it is always like either no MFA or third-party supply problems, right? So, and so when we look at GDPR, which I remember when it first came out, and I was like at a different company, and I was the CISO there, and it was a heck of a year. It's a heck of a year, and it was a lot, right? And it was confusing, and it's like lawyers are in the room trying to interpret it and this and that. And at the start of it, I didn't really like it, and then I actually happened to be on a panel with one of the writers, and then I really, after talking to him and all this for prep for the panel, I was really appreciative of the concept around it, right? Is it perfect? No, it's draft one, right? But it was, we will fine you if you don't do this, right? But we see this across whether it's moral turpitude, like the concept of is Facebook and Instagram healthy for children? And, it's always until something really bad happens, right? A rock through the window until that changes. But if there's a line, right? So if you sit there and throw CISOs in jail, the question is, how does the law interpret negligence for them? Right. And so they're also, anxiety isn't always good for a CISO. I actually think being relaxed is a lot better.
100%. And I'm not advocating for throwing CISOs in jail. I'm advocating for a better legal
an incentive program.
That's more driven by compliance and requirements than anything else. But let's get back into a little bit of a technical conversation here. In 2025, I know that you jump in on breach response, and that's how we met, by the way. For those of you who didn't know, I didn't really get a chance to introduce you because we dove right into our our topics here. But the way I met Lance was I was working on a breach response. It was Lockbit that had encrypted one of the clients that we that had called us to help them recover, and through Google searches, I actually stumbled upon Lance's article. I think that was on Bleeping Computers, where just a week ago in Black Hat, Saudi Arabia, you actually had showcased how you decrypted Logbit's algorithm.
Yeah,
And so
or
that's why,
Zeppelin at that time, but yeah.
you know,
So yeah.
and people that know me, when I want to get something done, I'm like a dog on the bone. So I took that article and tried to find where you live, basically.
Mhm.
And then I came
Yeah,
after
yeah,
looking for
it
you.
was Zeppelin, and then we got lucky
Yeah,
with the lockbit,
yeah,
as you remember.
yeah.
So it was a one-off with the lockbit because it was the Linux version. I don't have a crack for the big one, and I'm not claiming I do, but we
Right,
got lucky because of the way it occurred,
right,
right? Because and I don't know how much we can discuss, but I can, from a technical, all I can say is there was a cool way that we figured it out. But it was
recover
really
that
also
back again.
thankful to the team you brought in. It was
Yeah.
not just on my
No,
side. It was a teamwork thing, and it was. I think I remember when I first told you and we talked. I said, "Oh, I don't know lockbit, but I know, but I'm very lucky," is what I said to you.
Zeppelin. Yeah, that's right. No, that was
Yeah,
right.
yes. And then I said, "I'm very lucky though." So and we got lucky and literally unlocked both layers, and
That was incredible. I mean, the
yeah.
ransom was sitting at $1 million and they didn't pay a dime. But
Yeah.
tell me in 2025, tell me a breach that you thought was complex, maybe it was well done, that didn't really get the press that it deserved. Not that breaches deserve press, but you gotta kind of look at it and say, oh, that was cool what they did, right?
Here's a challenge with that.
Yeah,
I don't see too many breaches that are complex because of like what we just said.
yeah,
We're still the most of the people that are doing a good job of security,
yeah,
right, and have responded to not wanting to get breached. There's a bit of a thing. We don't have any statistics to think that prove that there's breach fatigue. We have. It seems like that's how we're feeling. It seems like that because I also work with a lot of clientele that is giving a major thing, and they'll hire us for red teams or this or that, and walk through and.
right,
And they take it very seriously, right? And mostly public companies, they're motivated by doing this because it goes to the board and it matters, is all part of that, and they get budget. The one I guess that I could say was wasn't impressive in the sense of it was innovative in the sense of I already kind of saw it coming because I've been playing with AI. It was the Anthropic. I can't remember who was the target at that one, but it was essentially using Anthropic's library system and Claude system to simply do 80% of the work
okay,
for all of the code, which I think is going more often than people think anyways, but this got publicized. I'm just trying to recall the who was the target. But essentially it kind of pretty much did most of the hack like hands-free, right?
wow, okay.
And that's not like necessarily meaning that they did an impressive technique or hack, because again, when we do red teams, a lot of the top players out there that we've red teamed, we can't get in on the outside. There's two parts of a red team, usually the outside part and then an assumed breach.
Right.
Assume eventually we get in, we get around something, but if we can't, we just report what their posture was there. And then on the other side, we set up a laptop inside and go from there as a normal user and just assume that maybe someday, because things change, that there could be a 0-day or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And all the mature companies out there, it's even if you have the best teams, very hard to get into it. Or you'd see that a lot more often. You'd be like, boom, boom, boom. But when you think about, like, for instance, I think the Salesforce breach was hacking one of the AI chat bots as well to use LLM to get information. I think it was a Salesforce one or something like that, if I can recall correctly. But essentially, there was a breach that was using their chat system to then get information that was given, through their retrieval augmented generation system, to then get them to give them information and allow them to get in. But it was, I think, from what I call also a third. They didn't hack Salesforce; they hacked the third-party supplier, right? And that was, scattered spider hunters, whatever the heck, right? The shiny guys. And ironically, they're just organized, chaotic, but organized criminals who just figure out the fastest way in your environment is through your vendors, right?
Right.
And
third party. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's their whole, we want to call TTPs or ammo,
Yeah.
They realize that it isn't, you don't go through the front door. You don't even go through the side windows. You go through the bridge that's connecting, some other town, and you go through that town and then go under the bridge and blah blah blah, right? So
solar winds or the Kaseya breach and things like that. And that's scaring me all the time, because you're kind of giving keys to the kingdom to somebody that you're hoping that their cybersecurity processes are sound enough, and just because the company is popular and big doesn't mean that they're always sound, right? Something that you said, which is ransomware is solvable, when you and I were talking last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to dive deeper into that. What does that mean? Ransomware is solvable.
Well, okay. So a lot of people, defend against ransomware. Here's the process right now: is one, we tell people to get the golden rule of backups and you're supposed to have offsite, but no one really does it, and they'll have what they call immutable backups. But if you have admin, they're not immutable; they're deletable, right? There is cycles, and you can only hold it so much data and blah blah. Yeah. And so many cases, unless you're using AWS or GCP's third-party managed services, where it might be a little bit more difficult to do it, because they'll have required SOC 2 four different locations and this and that, and it'd be you'd have to hack the managed service and all this stuff. But in many cases, if you're running backups yourself, a lot of times it's just an AWS or S3 bucket, or it's this and that. And once those are pwned, your internal stuff's pwned, it usually means that if you got admin, you get admin to the S3 in many common cases. Not every case, but it's a common vector, right? And I was looking at this, and I was realizing the defense in the way that our industry looks at it is they do malware research on the new ransomware. It's Medusa, or it's Cactus, or it's this and that, right? Including myself, right? That's how we broke Zeppelin, right? As we reverse engineer it, and then we try to see, it's got this new technique, and it uses this encryption, and we understand it, and we're depending on luck, meaning that there's an obstacle failure or a security failure within their software, right?
Right.
Or we just then send TTPs to try to monitor it, and it's a reactive process. What we don't do from a defensive perspective is use offensive. So what I did one day was I was why? I asked myself the hypothesis or the question of, why does ransomware always succeed? What is it inside ransomware that does this, right? So I decided to write ransomware, right?
Okay.
And so I'm literally going through the process of how does one write ransomware, right? And, my version was in Python. I wasn't even going complicated, but I realized it's a backup system, right? It literally, globs recurses the entire directories, usually finds the one that's deepest first, and then this and that. And it will grab all of that stuff, have that set, and then it will start if you want to do backups, most backups these days are encrypted. Right? And sent somewhere, and then you get an alert.
So it's exactly like a backup, basically.
And you have the key. The only difference in ransomware is that the bad guy has the key. Right? And he's sending it somewhere that you don't have control. Right. So it's literally who has the system. I mean, if you really want to be that person, you just go in, and I've seen this actually. I think it was, what's the Microsoft's locker system? It's BitLocker. Yeah. I saw an Iranian group do this. It wasn't even super. That was kind of complicated because it messes with the firmware. But it basically changed the BitLocker key, right? Okay. And then printed on the printer. It was human operated. So on the printer in the office's place, it printed the ransom note on the printer. It came out on the printer, and it used their own BitLocker against them, and just basically changed the key. And and that's another reason where you realize it's just an encrypted backup, and someone has your key or has changed your key, and you don't have access to it. That's it. And then it's if they decide to exfil or not, right? And then the alert is the note: your backup is done, or you're in trouble, right? And I realized something about that. It's you could solve this problem by, and this is why one of the reasons I think it gets in so well is that it's what's the difference between a backup and a ransomware every time it gets on the system? Right. And so, you could start looking at is there a way that I can just have my ransomware, when I get hit with it, back it up for me, and some way get that key, or some way get hooked in before they actually encrypt, but still also capture it as they're coming in. So there's when we look at things forward, it's not always about staying in defense. It's actually let me go step back and look at exactly how my attacker
Right.
You know, if I was the attacker, let me think through that process. We don't do that enough because we're always in response mode and survivor mode.
Yeah.
But we should invest in teams that literally, that's why like the big companies do have red teams. They're thinking about that problem. So
right. No, and it's you know, that's super interesting. Like you're actually looking at something that's more of a solution, and you're looking at it and saying how the solution and the problem are exactly identical because they do the exact same thing. It's just who's running it is the, you know.
So if you can intercept that, you can still get a free backup, and keep them out, right? So
that's incredible. Actually, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Real world story. It comes close to home, right? Because Hamilton, from where I live, is only an hour. I mean, you're a fellow Canadian, actually. You know, although you live in US and you're a fellow Canadian, so Hamilton. What I found interesting about Hamilton's story was, you know, when it even came out, was first of all, the MFA, they didn't have it properly set up. That's one thing. But the ransom that they asked and the remediation cost were $100,000, you know, within the cost of each other. So like, I think ransom asked was 18.5 and remediation cost was like 18.4, right?
Yeah.
You know, what's your thought on that? Tell me a little bit about that, right?
Well, and I think one, we're trying to practice refusing the ransomware because at that dollar amount, you don't want to change it to 18 times 2 next time.
Yes.
Right? Because you have to assume they're in your system still, right? That's one of the biggest things. So rebuild, you're like looking at it going, well, do I pay the ransomware and never know and there's no assurance? Or do I pay slightly more, about $1 million more, knowing they're out of our systems? And that rebuild might include actually good security this time. And it's unfortunately a big lesson learned, but a better investment long term. Right. So it's, you know, thinking of the future versus thinking and being stuck in the past, you know, that kind of thing. So does that make sense?
And the sad part about that was that the taxpayers were footing the bill now because the insurance company completely declined.
Yes, they did. Yes. That is the sad part. And you know, I have strong opinions about situations like that because we go back to your, like, why didn't someone be held accountable? But
this is a great forum for strong opinions. So give those strong opinions.
But well, no, I'm just saying, why should people pay taxes for a mistake that we expect?
Absolutely.
We pay taxes so that our you know, governments will actually run properly, right? You know, so, but you know, I think we can all feel that way. I guess it's not that controversial. I think we all feel that way underneath. So,
funny enough, I mean, it was sophisticated, and I think there's a lot of bureaucracy within the government, especially on the municipal level, that actually stops them from getting to the right security model. Right, a lot of red tape. Like by the time they can make a decision, it's harder.